Hi, my name is Bob Tabor, and in this course, you'll learn about JavaScript, the language. This course is aimed at those who are absolute beginners, so beginners to JavaScript, and frankly, given that we're going to discuss some very basic things like if statements and for loops, it's really designed for those who are beginners to programming in general. So if you know some HTML and some CSS and you want to learn JavaScript, awesome, you're in the right place. Also, there's nothing specific to Windows in this course. The tools that I use will be free and available in Mac and Linux as well. So you should be able to follow along no matter which operating system you're comfortable with using. Now, my background is really not all that important, but in case you're curious, I am a software developer by day, and by night I run a website called Developer University, or DevU. You can visit me at www.devu.com. Occasionally Microsoft invites me to create courses, and what you see here is a collaboration between myself and the good folks at Microsoft Virtual Academy. I've been creating courses like this since 2004, and I created a very successful version of a JavaScript course way back in 2011. It's been viewed millions of times, and I've gotten a lot of very positive feedback about it. This is a rewrite, a complete rewrite of that course, because frankly, JavaScript has changed dramatically in the, 6 or 7 years since I originally recorded that course. And so if you're already a software developer coming from a different programming language, this is kind of to pick back up what I said earlier, this might move a little bit slow for you. It just wasn't designed with you in mind. There might be some other courses that can move you through the introductory material a little bit more quickly than what I plan on, than the pace that I plan to take with this course. And my focus is the JavaScript language, the pure language, not web development necessarily, although we will discuss JavaScript in the context of the web browser at the very end of this course. But I felt like teaching JavaScript and how it's implemented in the web browser clouded the discussion of JavaScript, the language itself. So we're going to be writing what amounts to console, or rather command line style applications to isolate JavaScript, the language, as purely and simply as possible without clouding it with a bunch of HTML and CSS and things like that. We're going to discuss the language. We'll discuss popular patterns that have emerged from the JavaScript development community to help overcome some of the challenges associated with working with such a highly dynamic language. Such a unique language and sometimes kind of a quirky language. The last time that I recorded the course about JavaScript, way back in 2011, the course actually had a fairly long shelf life, and so much has changed with JavaScript since then that it necessitated that I actually play catch up and kind of learn some of the new features that were added because I wasn't keeping my skill set up. That's how quickly things change out from under you if you're not careful. If you know anything about JavaScript, you know that the community around JavaScript is moving extremely quickly. It's the most popular programming language, not just in the web browser, where there are hundreds of JavaScript frameworks and libraries that you can leverage in your own applications. But it's also becoming one of the most popular languages for server-side web development, meaning the code that actually runs on a web server that can perform business logic, that can interact with data storage, databases and other styles of data storage. And we're not going to talk about any of those topics in depth per se, but it is important to know that it all starts with a basic understanding of the things that we will discuss in this course, the absolute basics of JavaScript. So since this course may have a long shelf life, it's important to know that some of the features of the latest version of JavaScript, which I will be covering in this course, may not yet be implemented in all web browsers, depending on when you view this course. And then you have to take into account that some of the people viewing your website, for example, might be using very old web browsers. And so you have to keep that in account as well. So I'm going to make two general suggestions, and I'm going to try to remind you about these at the very end. There are still people on the internet that are viewing web pages with browsers that were created 10 years ago. So clearly in these cases, the newer features of JavaScript, many of which we'll discuss in this course, will not be available in those browsers, and your JavaScript won't even work in those web browsers. So you have a choice at that point. You can go one of two routes. You can either attempt to write your code in such a way that it is as friendly as possible to those older web browsers. Or you can use a tool which will transpile your JavaScript code that you write using the latest features of JavaScript. It'll transpile it back into a version of JavaScript that is compatible with all web browsers, even those that were built 10 years ago. And it uses a combination of techniques to accomplish this. We're not going to get into any of those. But if you want to take the first tact, if you want to be careful with the JavaScript that you write and only use those original features, I guess you can say, of JavaScript, or the early features of JavaScript, there's a website for you. You want to take a look at this website called Can I Use? And so we can take a look at maybe one of the newer features of JavaScript, the let keyword. I'll type it in here in the search box, Can I Use? And it will show us the let keyword, gives a quick description of what it is, and then it will show for the current versions of each of the web browsers whether it's supported or not. And you can see that the let keyword does have wide adoption across all modern web browsers, with a couple of exceptions. Now, if you want to go ahead and use the absolute latest version of JavaScript, and then take that second tact where you transpile your code so that it's backwards compatible with as many versions of the various web browsers as possible, then you want to check out a website like, and a tool actually, called Babel.js. So you can find it at babeljs.io, and it will, again, use a combination of techniques to take your code, and you can see some of this little animation that's on the page right now. You can actually use this to type in some code here and see how it converts it into the older style JavaScript. And I'm not going to cover how to use Babel in this course, but you should know up front that writing JavaScript for web browsers requires that you give some careful thought to how your JavaScript will ultimately be consumed and who your targets are. And that definitely means that you're going to have to take into consideration the fact that some people will be using older web browsers. Writing JavaScript that will run on a web server using a framework like Node.js is a bit easier because, well, you're going to have some upfront knowledge about where that code will ultimately be executed. But this is not a course specifically about Node.js either, even though we're going to use Node.js as a lightweight means of executing these little tiny JavaScript examples that we're going to create throughout this course. So you're going to learn enough about Node.js to be able to write a simple tiny application, but it won't do anything cool like serve up a web page. However, I'm sure there are other courses here on Microsoft Virtual Academy and elsewhere that will help you kind of take that next step. So the game plan for this course is to start in the very next video by installing the tools that you'll need to get started. And then we're going to start with the absolute ABCs of JavaScript and programming in general. And I encourage you to follow along by typing in the code that I type in the video. And that's, typing it yourself is the absolute best way to learn. It starts to develop muscle memory. You'll have many of those aha moments where you realize, oh, I see how these two things are related. You can hear it, and that's one thing, but to type it in and to see it on your own computer working is something entirely different. I highly recommend that you become an active learner by typing in the code yourself. But I encourage you also to pause and rewind the video as many times as you need. This isn't a race. You don't consume these kinds of videos the same way you would watch a TV show, a movie, or a YouTube video. If something's not clear to you, don't just let it go in one ear and out the other and worry and say, I'll figure it out later. No, stop down and figure it out now, because you never know. It might be something foundational you'll need to know in the next lesson and the next lesson. But by the end of this course, you're going to be well positioned to move on to a more advanced JavaScript course to learn how to use modern client frameworks like React and Vue and Angular. Or you'll be well positioned to learn more about server-side frameworks and libraries like Node.js and Express.js and others. But no matter what, you're going to have a great foundation to build on. If something I say doesn't make sense, again, I can't stress this enough, seek out other sources online. And you're going to ultimately want to know something from me. I've recorded enough of these courses. I know the questions that are already coming. You're going to ask me if there's a book that goes along with this course that I could recommend. And I'm sorry, I don't really have a specific recommendation. Honestly, my recommendation is that you exhaust the dozens, if not hundreds, of JavaScript online resources where you can simply use them for free and find them in an instant. If you want to get more explanation about any given idea that's covered in this course. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to encourage you to take your time. Don't feel overwhelmed. Stick with JavaScript, stick with this course, and you're going to be well rewarded, I promise. It'll be more difficult than playing a video game, than watching a movie or reading a book, but I promise you, you're going to wind up enjoying it even more than any of those things. Even if I wasn't paid to write code, I would do it because it's fun, it's mentally challenging, and you get this rush whenever you write code and you see it working and you're like, wow, this is awesome. So I'm glad you're going to get an opportunity to do that. It's the most fun you're going to have on a computer, I promise, and you'll wind up enjoying it. So stick with it, and I'll try to encourage you along the way. All right, so we'll get started in the next video. See you there. Thanks.